Okay, hello. Welcome to this DVW Analytics webinar. As you can read, hopefully you can see my screen, on audit within SAP and onto Alteryx. Hopefully I can give you some outline about why you should use Alteryx within audit. We're going to show you some demonstrations to give you a taste of the tools that are available, and hopefully we'll give you the offering to enter some questions, and to answer those I have my colleague Darren Walton, my glamorous assistant, on the line, who probably will stay silent but will certainly be answering any questions you have if you want to post them into the chat. Okay, my name's Ian James. I work for DVW Analytics. I have done for some years now, and we are a technology partner to Alteryx. Our software is a plugin for Alteryx and enables connectivity to the SAP systems. As you'll see, that's a wide and varied connectivity with many functionalities. So this specific webinar, we'll be looking at, as we mentioned, the audit function and how we can use Alteryx and the SAP connector within there. And the agenda we have for you today is just around, obviously, just an outline of what Alteryx is, and then just to take you through some of the possible functionalities that we have within Alteryx and with the DVW connectors. As you can read, to connect to transaction codes within SAP, to look at what we can do with more detailed data at table level, and then to look at a very simple example of a starting point, if you like, using the Alteryx Server to building some automation to build an automated end-to-end flow. So let's start with Alteryx. So many of you may already know, but if you haven't come across Alteryx before, it's an analytics platform. It uses a drag and drop system that allows you to build workflows. It is a data wrangling piece. The idea is it takes data from multivarious sources, which you can see on the left-hand side of the screen here, and gives you the ability to use, I think it's around, well over 260 different tools to automate flows and to, as you can see, to blend, to prepare, to report, to analyze them, and then on a more technical base to maybe run predictive or AI pieces. It's a low-code environment, so it's very user-friendly, very easy to get started with for business users, but also has the ability to enable coders to write their own code and to build on the base building blocks, as well as input and development and blending of data. Alteryx is able to push data out to, again, multivarious output points. So it may be a dashboard, could be files or databases. As you can read here, it could be bots or apps. And there are the two flavors, if you like, of Alteryx: the desktop version, which is used to run workflows manually, or indeed the server version, which gives even more power because it's a collaborative tool, but also a scheduling and automation tool. Gives a real huge platform to build your analytics. Where DVW come in is that we, as I mentioned from the top, we provide software which is a plugin to Alteryx Designer, and indeed to the Alteryx Server, and is used to connect Alteryx to SAP. So our raison d'etre, if you like, is the connectivity between those two systems. So in enabling data coming from SAP to be brought into the Alteryx system and then use the magic of Alteryx, all the tools and possibilities within Alteryx to manipulate that data. And on the other side, to also write back into SAP. So to go from Alteryx back into SAP and have a truly end-to-end flow. Hopefully we can give you some flavor of that. In terms of the systems that we can connect to, this is again just a flavor of those. You can see bottom right there, it is a partial list, but basically we can connect to the vast majority, we say about 95–96% of SAP systems. They're not all listed here. It's, if you're from the SAP side, you'll know there are too many acronyms to fit on one slide. So here are some of the main ones. You can see from top left ERP systems, whether it be ECC or older R3, through to S/4HANA systems we can connect to, BW on HANA or BW4 HANA. We also connect to all the legacy business suite applications, so CRM, SCM, etc., and all the industry solutions. As you can see, we've listed some below. We also have connectors that connect to the newest solutions from SAP, or acquired by SAP, maybe I should say. So we have business objects connectors and connectors for success factors, and also you can see on top right there to the planning system, so BPC and IBP. And then finally we have also we can connect in and pull and push data to the cloud solutions, so C4C or Cloud for Customer, Sales Cloud, etc., and Marketing Cloud. So a vast range of possibilities here where we can pull data. I mean, from the audit space, we're probably looking more obviously on the ECC side, but also maybe BW can come in, and maybe some of the business suite and industry solutions, of course. So Alteryx provides, together with the Alteryx connector, a real opportunity to dynamically and quickly get to your data in SAP. I'd like to illustrate that straight off the bat here by showing you some a quick demonstration around one of the tools, which is the one I mentioned before, that enables us to connect to transaction codes within SAP, for instance. So this obviously starts, at a straightforward sense in terms of the business users will be very familiar with this. There's no real coding required. And certainly if you can run the T code within the SAP GUI, you can run it within the tool in order to get the data, instead of obviously on the GUI, into Alteryx. The tool works, as you can read here, with standard SAP transactions and the ABAP code, the programs behind those transactions. It can work with report variants. So if you have variants, and I'll show you this in the examples that are sitting within your SAP system, we can surface them within Alteryx, and we can use those to run the reports. But we can also define manual filters or even dynamic filters, as I'll show you also, within the Alteryx solution. There's some nice functionality as well. I mentioned splits in here, but maybe we'll come back and I'll show you as we go through the examples. We also have a similar tool. I won't show you this today, but the reason it's here is that it shows two possibilities. One is to run the transaction live into Alteryx if you like. The alternative is to read from the SAP SPOOL. And again, if you know SAP, then if you run a transaction code, for instance, in the background, then it will create its output as a spool file. In the olden days, I guess we used to print those onto paper, and but nowadays they sit there and they can be surfaced, if you like, using this tool within Alteryx, so we can pull that data through into Alteryx. So let's quickly go into a demo. Let's go into demo mode and show you one of those tools, the SAP report tool. I'm going to start actually. This is just start by showing you Alteryx. If you haven't seen Alteryx before, this is the Alteryx Designer. The standard offering from Alteryx gives the possibility to bring in these are the 260 different tools that you can see, and the idea is that you can pull these into your canvas here and build your workflows and join the data flow as you go along. When you purchase the add-on, our add-on for SAP connectivity, then we supply other tools such as these guys here, so SAP read tools and write tools. We also have a metadata connect tool which works with the Alteryx Connect solution. Here are cloud solutions, C4C we mentioned, and Marketing Cloud, and also SuccessFactors, Business Objects, IBP was also mentioned. So those are all the tools. Let's just start actually in the SAP system. I'm hoping this is still gonna be live. Of course it hasn't, it's gone to sleep. Typical. Let's just restart the system there. So I'm actually going to start, as you can see, in the SAP system itself, and I'm going to run the T code FBL3N. And the auditors, or many of you will have got financial background and have used SAP, will know this T code. And as you can see, even if you don't, you can see from the top, it gives you GL line item data, so general ledger line item data. And I'm going to use a variant just to show you what it looks like, the data, when we run this T code in SAP. So a variant gives me obviously some parameters that I've saved within the system, and I'm going to run this T code now and give you a view of what that output looks like. You can see that this is a set reporting solution. So we have a GL and company code, and each combination of those GLs and company codes, we get a little mini table with the related line items, some totals here, and then on to the next combination, and so on and so forth. There are lots in this report. Now in Alteryx, we can run that exact report, but you can see that the data that it produces isn't really very useful for analytics. So our tools actually are able to extract that data and manipulate it for you. So hopefully I can show in a quick demo here how easy that can be done. So we start all our workflows, the ones that connect to SAP, with an SAP connector and SAP logon tool. And this does as it says on the tin, really. It allows us to connect to our SAP system. And we have within our plugin the ability to define those systems, a little bit like the SAP logon pad. So you will have your systems set up here, and for instance, I've got BW, as you can see, BW systems, S4HANA systems, business objects, etc., etc., etc. Many systems set up in here, and the configuration is then held within my desktop. As I say, this is very akin to your SAP logon pad, and you can see here that we have those parameters come through. And indeed, now I've added the system, it brings through my username and password. This is of course encrypted on my machine, so it's safe and sound. Notice also, by the way, we can connect via SSO, so that's covered off there, and we can ping the system. Now, if we ping the system, we get a successful ping. That means that we're actually connected to that system, and we can now start to work. As I mentioned, we're going to bring in our SAP report tool, and as I drag that into the canvas, it connects automatically to the logon. The logon tool passes, if you like, those credentials, that connectivity into the tool. And you can see that as with all other Alteryx tools, once you pull the tool in, we have a configuration window. And here we just work through. So do we want a transaction code or a report? We can go straight to the program if we know it. But let's use a transaction code as we did in the GUI just now. So FBL3N. And when I search, that's now talking back into the SAP system and bringing back the related program. And once I've selected the program, I give it a few seconds, then I get to see the parameter screen, and indeed I can manually enter these. I'll show you an example of this in a minute, but let's just use the variant for now. So we're doing like for like. So I could manually enter those details, but also, as you can see in the drop down here, we have those variants that I saw on the SAP side. So if I select the variant and now skip straight to the sample data, I can look at a raw preview of that. And what that's doing is running that T code with that variant, but it's running it within Alteryx. And as you can see straight away, we have results. Now, we can see it's exactly what we saw on the SAP side, those combinations of GL and company code together with the mini tables, and we have many of those. Okay, now we could just push that into, this is it now within Alteryx, obviously. So we could push that data across and we could use that data, but it's not very user friendly. It's not very usable in terms of analytics because of all the structures that are built into the output of this report. So we can play around with this. For instance, this GL and company code, it would be really nice if we could put those into a column rather than just be a header. So we can do exactly that. If we right click and we can process this as a header field, same with the company code. And that will put those two values into a column for this little table. It will change as it goes to the next mini table. We can see that the table itself has headers here. So we can right click and say, look, these are the headers for the rest of my data. And indeed, if I press raw preview again, it starts to mark that up. Notice that it's recognized that GL account is repeated, as is that header line in green. But what's more, we can tidy up even more. We don't like these this row of dashes. This is not really very useful analytically. So let's just ignore that row. So it's going to ignore all dashes. And also, hey, I don't really need the summations here because we could do that totaling afterwards within Alteryx. So what I can do is I can right click and I can ignore that row. Now it's not perfect because it can't work out what we can as humans, but what it's saying is it's seen the pipe and saying, look, anything that starts with a pipe, ignore it. But that's not going to help because we're going to lose our data. So we can actually manually maintain this and overlay it with what it actually is. So it should be pipe space and then star. So anytime where we see that combination in the first 4 digits, it's going to ignore those. So let's do a raw preview of that. And we start now to see that in blue and green, those are the header rows. We've got in white our data rows, and then the rows where it's grayed out, it's just going to ignore this. And indeed, if we preview this now, we can start to see what the output's going to look like. You can see we've got GL and company code in the columns. We can see that there are no lines of dashes or totals. And now if we right click, we can add a little browser tool. This is a standard Alteryx tool, and we can run that workflow, which will of course run the T code with those with that variant, but then apply those adjustments, those manipulations, and immediately we can see that we have usable data within Alteryx, nicely formatted and ready to use downstream. And of course, we can run multiple T codes. We can, as you'll see later, we can read data from tables, maybe queries, maybe BW, or any of the other systems, of course. So there's lots of possibility here, and I'll show you some more of those later in the time. But you can see how simple it is to get up and running. One other nice feature, if I can just flick across, is that this is a very similar piece. I mentioned that we can actually run our extractions, not using a variant, but we could input, if we like, the values manually into the parameter screen here. So you can see I'm using company code 3000, a particular GL, and I've run this already. But you can see that the data comes across, and we have our records here. Now, what's even nicer is that we can make this more dynamic. So we can right click here and add, just copy those values. So I'm going to make the entry of the GL account more dynamic. If I paste this here, then you can see that I can join that value into this selection anchor or dynamic filter anchor, and I can choose which values I'm going to use here. So I'm going to change the values into here. And what's nice is I don't just have to use one GL, I could add more, I could do a range, but I'm just going to, for now, put a couple of values in. So let's do 191101. And I'm also going to make this split functionality true, just to show you what this does. So what this is going to do is it's going to pass these two filters for these two GLs into the tool, but because the split is true, it will run two separate transaction codes, one for each. Now, it's not necessary to do this in this case, but it's a nice illustration of how, a nice simple illustration of how this works. You can see that in the tool itself, it's mapped automatically the values of those specific filters. And now if I run, you can see on my SAP report tool that it's passed two filters in. You can see it's run the first T code, the second T code, and there we see first GL and the second GL. And so we can build more dynamic input. So the user could input this. And as you'll see later, that input could be within the server. So rather than having to run the T code, we could run what's called an analytic app within the server, which allows for a parameter to be put in of the specific GL code, and we could parameterize this within the server. We'll show you that later. So hopefully that gives you a flavor of one of the tools, how we can very quickly get started pulling SAP data into Alteryx. I'd like now to go back to our slide and start to talk about this solution a little bit more specific around specifically, should I say, around the audit area. One of the big competitors, if you like, or one of the standards, solutions that is used greatly within the SAP sphere is ACL, or Galvanize, and it's been used a lot. It's a great tool, has lots of possibilities, and is, as I say, very widely used. And I'd like just to do a comparison of ACL versus what an Alteryx offering might give you. I think you can see the pictures already give you a hint of where this is going. So let's compare these. There's a lot written here. I'll let you read yourself, but I'm just going to talk around these, so hopefully you get the impression. Obviously, ease of use. You saw already that, and if you know ACL, then it's based a lot on coded scripts, and there's commands there. So there's a degree of coding required, or coding capability required, in order to get up and running. You've seen already that in Alteryx, the view and the focus is around democratizing that piece. It's code free, and is very much drag and drop in terms of building the workflows. But it's also code friendly. There is a possibility to code in R or Python, and bring in those with a more developer bent and more coding background. In terms of time to value, because of those two, because of what we've just mentioned, ACL tends to not really lend itself to rapid deployment. It's much more, if you like, an old-fashioned SAP model where there's going to be a much more structured project need to be put in place in order to build any solution out of ACL. You've already seen that with Alteryx, there's a much more possibility for citizen data science, let's say at the start. So it's possible to quickly build in an agile way, to fail fast if you like, solutions that will build out and interrogate data. Therefore, it's really good for answering questions that are ad hoc and are not necessarily set in stone that they're going to be the same every time. Equally, however, as you'll see hopefully later in the demonstrations, it does lend itself to that strong governance models, to those stable environments where you want particular extractions, particular flows to run regularly, maybe scheduled, etc., etc. And the speed of that development we've seen in many places is really good, really fast. We've seen lots of examples where companies have moved from a more traditional waterfall based to a more agile approach, and really seen value be land much more quickly. In terms of advanced analytics, I mentioned them at the top, but it is possible to code in on the ACL side statistical measures and more advanced technology. However, within Alteryx, those come as standard as tools, and there are many standard modeling tools. I think it's 40 plus high-level statistical modeling tools that will allow for really deep analysis. And you know, as a mathematician myself, actually, you know, it really gives you great possibility. In terms of data quality, the data that's extracted for ACL is at table level. That's the standard there. You've seen already that we can pull from T codes, so we can use and leverage the business logic that's pre-configured, if you like, in SAP. If it's in BW, we can pull from there. So we can, and again, there may be business logic when the data flows into a cube, or maybe within the query that gets built in BW. In terms of community, there's good communities on both sides. The one thing to say there is that obviously ACL is audit focused, whereas Alteryx is more generalistic, and therefore it brings a wider audience and maybe a few more views to share ideas and collaborate. I really encourage you to go onto the Alteryx community just to have a look at the type of activities, the type of sharing, the type of knowledge base that is out there. It's really quite good. Performance, ACL uses basically an SAP extraction module, and in there are some, if you like, baked in inefficiencies. However, with the DBW Analytics extractors, we have improved upon the SAP standard, and we can show that, and indeed we have tested at very large scale, both in demo systems but also live on customer site, where massive volumes, tens of millions of records can be extracted. Firstly, it can be done safely without any harm to the SAP system, but at a massively improved rate. You see, at least 50% better. SAP connectivity, there is some extra code needed on the ACL side. Most of the ACS tools, the Alteryx Connector for SAP tools, don't need any SAP extra code. One or two do, but that's just where we need, where large data volumes have been pulled out. So you need that extra, as I just mentioned above, the extra performance. In terms of cost of ownership, as I say, there's a certain skill development needed. The total piece for ACL is much bigger and a more traditional project base, and so that has its own costs. The beauty of Alteryx is, as it mentions here, we can apply changes and test on the fly. We can apply a much more agile approach. Therefore, deployment is much more rapid. We fail fast, and therefore cost of ownership tends to be much lower. And as we've said, you know, we move forward much quicker. In terms of automation, again, it's much more scripted on the ACL side. As you'll see, the automation on the Alteryx side is based on the Alteryx Server. and underlying those are the workflows, just like the one you've just seen. And the idea here is that we can put a whole governance around those workflows, and as you'll see, we can publish them, we can allow and collaborate with others who don't have SAP knowledge maybe, or Alteryx knowledge, and they can run the workflows from the server, from the gallery if you like, but also there's an underlying scheduling capability so that we can in a timely manner produce data end to end from source, maybe SAP, maybe elsewhere, maybe both, and combine and push that data to where we need it. In terms of one call out, which is nice for Audit, we have a tool on the Alteryx side which allows you to extract SAP documents. So these are maybe a PDF that's connected to a sales order, etc., etc. So it's documents that are connected to an SAP object. We have tools that can extract those, can identify them first, extract them, and then push them to a given location, ready to be interrogated and looked at separately and quickly. So this is, we've seen a great deal of take up on that tool. There's nothing like that on the ACL side, of course. Predictive analysis I've already mentioned, so I won't say too much more about that, but just, hey, look, there's lots of possibility, much more out of the box from Alteryx. And then in terms of governance, should I say, really, the only real governance you get on the ACL side is reliance upon your developers to add comments correctly, and a bit like VBA comments in Excel. There needs to be a governance around that. In terms of the workflow size, well, the workflow is visualized very easily. You can see exactly what it does. Indeed, you can interrogate step by step what's going on. On top of that, within the ACS tools, so the connector tools, we have the ability to log exactly what is happening when we extract that data from SAP. So we can say, when the data is extracted, exactly what parameters are being used on what tables or T codes or whatever it may be, so that the extraction can be audited in itself, so that we can very easily see what's going on. So it's very much self governing, and of course on the server side there's lots of governance there. You'll see some of that later. Okay, let's move on. So a little bit more demo now. So I'm going to show you the table tool this time, and the table tool basically does what it says. It connects into SAP tables. You can see on the screen there that we can connect into all types of tables, transparent pool, clustered, etc., etc. But we can also connect into SAP views and indeed HANA views from this tool. So we can connect into a multivarious arenas. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen, and I'll show you this in Alteryx in a second, but the configuration gives you the ability to see the metadata of that table, the columns, to select in a user-friendly way which columns you want outputted or don't, as the case may be. You can filter on the data, and again, you've got that split functionality. And that's really useful then when you're doing those big volumes. And the split functionality allows you again to break down, to chunk up your data calls. If you're pulling 100 million lines of data, then you're gonna have to break that up. You're gonna have to break that up into smaller chunks. The tools allow you to do that, and hopefully we can show you that in the demonstration. We're going to use our filter tool, which is another one of our tools, and this again helps in the organization of that. And this diagram here is a preview, if you like, of the demo. It's a nested table. We're going to use BKPF, the header table, pull some data from there, but use the filter tool to pull only the data that we want from the line item table BSEG. So we're being very specific here. We're being very prescriptive of exactly the data we want, so we're not being wasteful. The filter tool, as you'll see, however, also allows us to dynamically chunk up those calls so that we're also not stressing the SAP system. It's worth calling out now, actually, at this point, that the way that the connectors connect into SAP is very friendly, if you like, to the SAP side. Those IT basis people in your teams back at the home office will be happy to see that we only ever connect to the application server or the application layer, which means two main things really. One is that we never will, or we never will hit the database directly. By hitting the application layer, then that brings in the ability to look at the user's authorizations. You saw already that I had to log on, so it will respect entirely the authorizations that have been set up on the SAP side. So if the SAP team say I can't see that data, then these tools won't let you see that data by magic, as it were. It respects that entirely. And on the other side, the piece where it keeps the SAP system as a whole secure is that it respects the safety belts that have been put in place by your IT team, your SAP basis team, to ensure that you don't pull too much data and stress the SAP system beyond its means. You'll have seen that if you've ever run the table view tool, SE16. If you try and pull everything from BKPF, it will at some point, maybe after a certain amount of time or a certain amount of data, tell you in the GUI, look, I'm not doing this. That's enough. It's too much. Bang, and it will throw you out. It won't break the system. All it's doing is saying, no, it's too much. Now, by chunking up those calls, firstly, we respect those boundaries, those safety belts, but by chunking them up, it means that we can pull data in those smaller chunks, and then the tool will recombine them and pass them downstream into our workflow. So let's show you that. I want to show you, as you can see, controlling that table data access, and then how you might start looking at maybe processing deltas, which obviously is much more efficient than pulling all of the tables. Before we do, oops, sorry. Let's skip into Alteryx then, and I'm going to have a look at a workflow that I've pre-prepared and pre-run, as you can see. I cheated a little bit here. It doesn't take long to run, but as you'll see, I'll run it with the delta in a minute. But you can see that we've got our SAP tool, logon tool. I'm not going to go there, but I will come here. So here we have our table tool. As you can see in the configuration window here, we define our table. Obviously, it's predefined here because I've set this up already. But if we're starting from scratch, all we do is we search. We put in our string. In this case, it's the technical name of the table. And if I say search, it will find that technical name. And indeed, anywhere else that you see that character set within the technical names. It can also, however, search on the description. So if I put accounting in, it will bring back the counting tables. Another nice feature is if you right click, I can get all the related tables. So obviously if I click on there, I won't do it now, but if you click on there, you'll get everything that's related to BKPF. So I would expect to see the BSEG table. This is the header table. So I'd expect to see that BSEG line item table there. Once we've selected our table, then you can see that what comes back is the metadata, the structure of that table. And these are all the columns that are held within there. We don't have to have them all output. So we can select specifically which ones. So the user can just say, hey, these are the ones I want. You can see we've got the technical names here if you like things that way. But equally, we can look at text if that makes more sense to you. Okay, so we can pick the specific fields that we want. We can also then right click on any of these and say, look, let's add a filter here. So if I want to look at a particular document type, right click on there, add a filter. What it's doing now is it's looking back on the SAP system, and if it's maintained, it will bring back the list that's available within the system. As you can see, I can pick a given one, I can double click and filter on that specific one. I can do a range, so between, greater than, etc., or I can just select particular values as being those to filter. Okay, when I hit OK, it's going to pass those back across. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to break my demo, but it looks something like this. Here's one I did earlier. Those know a little bit of German, then Jahr is years, although 2019 I suppose gives it away. And you can see that I'm filtering just on 2019. I've also just pulled back 200 records, but I could bring back all the data in 2019 how I wanted to. Obviously, you've got to be careful because this is a huge table. So it's good to filter and then do that splitting to chunk up those calls. All will be done. Once that's run, then I hit the D anchor and I can see that the output is exactly as I asked for. Here's the columns I selected, and here's the data ready to use downstream. And indeed, I'm going to pass that down to just a standard Alteryx join tool. But on the other lane, if you like, down here, I'm also going to pass it to our filter tool. And on the filter tool, basically, this builds, as it suggests, filters for downstream tools. We can, as you saw, pass filters into our tools dynamically. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use all the accounting documents. I'm going to use the accounting document numbers in order to pull specifically from the BSEG table the line items that I'm interested in. And furthermore, I'm going to make sure that I pull in the company code and fiscal year, because obviously that combination gives me a unique entry. Finally, I'm going to say, you can just about see this. If I just scroll a bit, I still can't see it, of course. I'm going to group these. And what this means is it's the tool, as you'll see in a second, it takes all combinations of company code and fiscal year and then groups all the accounting documents that relate to that combination. It will then send those as one into the next step. And the next step in this case is a macro. And this is a standard Alteryx construct. And a macro, as it suggests, is just a subroutine. It's a subprogram that can be run iteratively. And as you can see, our filter tool has identified 7 different groups, 0 to 6, discuss, but as you can see, there are 7. And if we look at the filters that it's sending, then in group 1, or group 0, should I say, then we have a certain company code in year, and then here are all the accounting document numbers that relate to it. And if I scroll down a little, then I can get to the next group and see there's another different company code and year and another range of values. So the first iteration will run for the top values here, the second for this, and so on and so on. If I look actually in the macro, I've already opened it. It's just here. Check, get the right one. There we are. And the macro is very, very simple. It's really easy to set up. And again, it's just another of our tools. It's a table tool, but this time I'm calling the BSEG table. You can see here's my input. I'll pass those filters into the input and they get passed into the tool. Of course, I need an SAP logon tool. And then I have this control parameter, the group, which allows me to run this iteratively. So it will run for group 0, for group 1, etc., etc. And out comes the data out the output. Once that's done, if I click on the out of the macro, you can now see that I'm pulling out now my BSEG data. This BSEG data has details, obviously a line item data. This is the line item value here. You can see different line items and they get passed into the join tool. And this is just to show, look, hey, once we're in Alteryx, this data is no longer SAP data, it's Alteryx data. So like all other data within Alteryx, Alteryx doesn't care where it came from. It can still use it, manipulate it, and we're just in this case doing a simple join. And down the line, we can then see that that data comes out combined. So we'll have our headers and the related line item data in here too. Just to show that some other tools, for instance, this is obviously simple. Once it's in the system, we can then play with that data, combine it, blend it, cleanse it, do whatever we like with it, and then push it obviously to wherever we like. In this case, just to show that we play nicely, if you like, with Alteryx, then this data, we've used a couple of tools here, and we basically, instead of having the technical names as the headers, we've changed them into text, for instance. Obviously a very simple example, but it could be obviously much more interesting. So that's our flow there with table data. One extra little piece is our ability to run a delta. Because we've got this this anchor here, this selection anchor, this is a dynamic filter. So we can pass, if we like, as you saw before, and all our tools have this, a selection, a filter into the tool dynamically. Now I've used here just a standard input tool from Alteryx. Obviously this is hard coded, but I could change this manually here, and this would pass the relevant value into there. It's a date. This date, of course, doesn't have to be manual. It could be automatically generated. We can use something like the where's it gone? Sorry, the formula tool here from Alteryx to generate today's date, maybe the last 90 days, last year, whatever it may be that we need to pass in, and we can pass that dynamically into the table tool in order to get the data we want. So we can be very specific and very quickly build quite powerful flows that, as you'll see in the next step, can be then passed on and automated, scheduled, and run autonomously within the server. Okay. So that's a taster of the tools. As I said, you've seen most of these already now, or many of these already. So table tool and the report tool, the T-code tool. We can read SAP queries, read from SPOOL. We have an OData capability, so we can connect to SAP OData and read from there. We have some premium capabilities to read from BAPIs and RFC-enabled function modules. We said about the documents and attachments, and also BW and HANA views we can read from, all objects in BW and S for HANA, BW for HANA, etc., etc. We work with the designer primarily. So the add-in works with obviously the ACS for Alteryx Designer does what it says. It works with the designer, and so the workflows would be built and created in Designer typically, and then, as you'll see shortly, are then published to the server, and it's here that they can be run and automated. Notice also, however, that we have a suite of write tools against some of the standard SAP solutions for writing back data into SAP. So certainly BAPI and IDOC are well known. BAPI tends to be more at maybe a transactional level, so you're able to write back into SAP transactions, if you like, almost. And at IDOC, it tends to be used when a more robust governable solution. But both are very, very well formed and well used solutions, as are RFC-enabled function modules. Again, we can write back with OData where that's available, and into BW info providers if it's on the BW side we're interested in. So lots of possibilities there, and lots of capability. So I think I've talked to most of these important features, so I'm not going to labour the point. We can see that that we respect that authorizations is a key one, that we work with SAP rather than against it to build. So we're not going to stress the systems, but a very powerful solution. To close out, I'm just aware that the time's running on with us, so I'm going to quickly move on and move to, I want to show you some of the server capabilities. And the way that server works, as I mentioned before, is that you design within the designer, you test your workflow, and then once you're happy with the workflow in a manual sense, you can publish it into server. Once the workflow is in Alteryx Server, it can be run from there. There's a separate plugin for server, but it works largely the same way as Designer does. And then the calls when the workflows are run directly from server into your SAP system and extract live data at that point. What you do with that data, well, it's up to you and your imagination, but what I'll show you shortly is the ability to push an email, but also you can push to analytics, dashboards, other databases, etc., etc. So lots of possibilities, and indeed, as you saw, you can push to SAP. So let's jump onto the solution then. This is the server, or the gallery, if you like. This is our DVW analytics one, as you can see. And if I go across to my private studio, of course, it's logged me out, typical. Go across to my private studio, then you can see these are my workflows that I built and published into the server. If I look at this one here, then the idea of this workflow, I'll show you the actual workflow in a second, is to extract some exceptions. In this case, it's to look at POs over a certain time period and give me anywhere where a line item is above a certain value. We can schedule that workflow, so maybe we want it to run every day. And with this workflow, maybe that's the way it works. It makes sense to work because you can run it, show me everything above that value, and it's going to send an email out, as you'll see, with some of the details of where those exceptions lie, and maybe become the focal point for an investigation. So there's lots of possibilities around scheduling there. If we just step back, however, let's just run it from manual. So this is as if I were the user coming onto the gallery. I can run it, and I can even set the parameter here of the value. So I'm going to say anything above 2,500, and I'm going to run this thing. So while that's running, I'm just going to jump back into Alteryx and just show you what the workflow looks like. The designer and the server work together. So if I open my workflow from my company's gallery, then you can see that in my studio, here's my workflow. I'm just going to open that. And again, this is fairly simple workflow. You can see that here's my table extract, where I'm going to define my exceptions. I've used some dynamic filters. You can see some are manual, but I've overlaid them with this tool here. This gives us two possibilities. One is that it will allow me to replace the value with what's coming in from my parameter. That's where I put that 2,500. But also, this is just to show you that I can say, look, let's make it programmatical. So, and again, this is fairly straightforward to learn, and lots of examples within the community in Alteryx. But in here, you can see that I'm using today's date and then adjusting it to get the value I want. Okay, so it's passing through a particular value into the table, finding my exceptions, everything below that limit, or above that limit, should I say, and it's going to pass that data and send a report in an email for me. I've done a little bit more. I've also gone and found the headers of this PO, because this is line item. I've looked at the other data within that same PO. I've joined them, and I'm going to send it out in an Excel and a Word document. But basically, this is just me playing. So let's see what it looks like. You can see that in our solution, as a user on the gallery side, I can see my two outputs here. Okay, so here's my Excel and my Word document, and I can choose the output I want, so I can download them from here if I was running it manually. However, as I said, it's more likely this is run as a let's say, as a scheduled workflow every day, say. If I just refresh here, hopefully that email's landed here. Oh, look at that. And as you can see, here's my exceptions in the body of the email, which is quite nice. It's got the two documents here that I mentioned. So for instance, we can do things like, we can build graphs, add the details of the POs. You see there's multi-lines in this one. And if we want more details, then we can maybe have an Excel with everything we need to start building. But you get the idea. This is just a very quick, simple example. So I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to push on, just a few minutes left. And just wanted to mention just a couple of things about our website and the offering from DVW. If you do go on our website, or indeed into the Alteryx gallery, in the Alteryx gallery we've got sample workflows there, which we see as very much starting points to get you up and running. One is the nested BKPF BSEG workflow that you saw just now, but there are many others, over 50 and ever growing. And these guys will give you a good flavor of how to access the data. Even if it's not the table you exactly want, it gives you some ideas of how it can be done and a real good starting point. And many of our customers use these regularly to get things kicked off and accelerated. We also have a lot of information on our website. We have many blogs. As you can see, if you click on blogs and hit audit, you'll get all those related to audit. But obviously, Alteryx is a wider tool, so maybe some of the other, maybe the finance, et cetera, might be interesting to you. And just to mention that, look, you know, we've been around for 4 or 5 years now with our software. Alteryx a little longer than that, but between us, we're servicing now over 200 customers globally. You can see some of the names there. Some are big players, and maybe some others, you know, smaller. We have many, obviously, within the audit space too. Not sure we've got time for questions, but hopefully you've been firing your questions at Darren, and he's been answering on the chat. I'd like to probably leave it there. I'm just aware of the time now, so at that point, I would like to thank you for your attention. Hopefully, you've seen that that Alteryx and the ACS connectors for SAP give a valuable offering. If you've got any questions at all, please feel free to contact me. That's ian.james@dvwsolutions.com, or visit our website. That's dvwanalytics.com, and get in contact via there, or look at our as I said, the blogs and the information over on that site. Thank you again for your attention, and hopefully I'll hear from you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.